You're listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you about our brand new Facebook page. Just search Range Minded Podcast and you'll find us. We really appreciate it too if you could give us a like, some feedback, and let us know what you want to hear on the podcast. Also, be on the lookout for us coming up on Instagram as well. Just the same handle, Range Minded Podcast, and you should be able to find us. This is episode number 32, where Steve, Ricky, and I talk about the many different ways to teach kids about firearms, what to do with both kids and firearms in the house, and we touch on a personal story that Steve had with his daughter and their school district, and relate that to some national news stories about kids getting suspended for something as simple as liking a picture of a gun on social media. Remember that the opinions we share here are our own, but we do have a lively conversation with a special cameo from Instructor Bill. As always, thanks for listening to Range Minded, and we hope you enjoy episode number 32, The Many Ways to Teach Your Kids About Firearms. Hello, and welcome to Range Minded, episode number 32.
What's up, fellas and fellarettes?
Steve Zimmerman, live from Meridian, Idaho.
In the house.
Yeah, at Independence Indoor Shooting, because this is from Independence Indoor Shooting.
Yes.
Along with Ricky Kasner and myself, Mark Long. We're going to talk about kids today.
It's all about the children.
Save the children. I actually don't have kids, so...
The youth of the nation, right? Mm-hmm.
You guys both have kids.
A couple.
And so I'm going to defer to you on this one, but people get
you don't feel like you're an authority on rearing children?
No, not even a little bit. I can't even pretend. I have cats.
So how do you keep your cats safe?
I don't let them handle guns.
You teach your cats about guns?
I taught them gun safety, yeah. They're locked up and stored away. And
you guys remember, it wasn't very long ago, there was a thing going around Facebook about, I think it was a fake book about teaching your cat about gun safety.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that, yeah. Yeah, I read them that book. They're well-versed now. So they're going to come get training here at Independence.
Right, meow?
Right, meow. But it seems to be that with social media, with schools, with kids, and the current gun climate, there's a lot of kind of gray area and a lot of...
Ricky's not entertained. He's yawning over here.
A lot of overreaction. Yeah, we're
Mark's
keeping
just
Ricky up.
putting me to sleep. I'm just like, okay,
We're keeping
Mark.
you up, Ricky? I'm sorry. Didn't know the podcast is that boring.
We can't even keep
Can't even keep
host
Ricky
awake.
up. Yeah. But kids and firearms, people get touchy about that.
I don't know if you can talk about kids and touchy in the same sentence. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Keep this.
I'm sorry.
I don't even know how to say that a different way. Sensitive.
We get sensitive about the subject.
Yeah. There's people
Watch
are very
your words, Mark.
opinionated
Watch
on
your
it. Thank
words.
you. That's why I don't have kids, because I don't have to watch my words. But people and schools get a little, upset.
Yeah, and
over some interesting things, like, at least according to the news.
Overboard. And some of these stories aren't new. Some of the listeners are, I remember hearing about that 7 years ago, But it's still, nonetheless, it's still current. It's still happening in schools. Even in Idaho, it's happening.
Yeah, schools are a little, I think, overreacting, and we'll dive into it and see. But one of the things that I think is important to remember is that if we're going to keep, a healthy culture of firearms and promote a healthy, respect of firearms and everything, we have to educate kids.
Absolutely.
And we can't let people show kids or try to convince kids that guns are dangerous, just sitting there by themselves, or
bad.
evil. Yeah, or evil.
Which is silly, because they'll sit and parents will buy their kids Call of Duty
without a second thought,
and let them play that for hours on end, and then, but guns are bad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we'll dive into a little bit of gun safety with children, I think, as well, since we can defer to the two fathers on the podcast here. But let's dive.
I think we should talk a little bit about just actual general home safety. If somebody were to break in, because I'm a proponent of, don't just keep your kids out of the loop. They can be an active participant
my son,
in protecting.
So I have a 16-year-old son, and he's very capable of using a firearm, Comfortable
responsible.
comfortable might be a different story, but he's capable of using a firearm in defense. 100% capable.
Right. And that's the other thing, too. There's a bunch of news stories about, teenagers defending their homes from burglars, too.
And I think we talked about that in one of the other podcasts, right?
Yeah, we talked about it a few
kid from
episodes
Rigby
ago.
that shot an intruder.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So really, I mean, kids can be responsible with firearms. It's just you have to teach them how and be an active parent.
And it's about being responsible. Yeah.
A responsible adult. So, also, sidebar, you may hear some machine gun fire in the background since we're recording live.
Yeah, we're at the store
during hours.
Yeah, it's more fun.
Yeah,
other than we're obscured by
soundproofing.
What's going on out there by the soundproofing on the window? I don't even know if it's doing anything really.
Well, I can pretend. So, but you've dug up some articles, Steve, on schools handing out suspensions.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Detentions, policies, all that kind of stuff. And I think this is actually pretty interesting. So why don't we dive into the first one?
Well, let me preface why this came to mind. So, like I say, this stuff's happening in Idaho. I live in eastern Idaho. My kids go to school in, quote, conservative areas.
Yeah, and I mean Rigby. Sorry, I said the name of your town. Now there's going to be stalkers.
So,
but that is like, if you can think of a more conservative place, I mean, you would be hard pressed to think of a more conservative place.
So, and some of you folks probably have seen it before. There's the hats and the stickers out there where Idaho's turned to the side, and they input
it looks like a gun.
Yeah, it looks like a gun, and they're shooting a tree out the top of Idaho, right? So, my kids grow up in a gun-friendly household. You probably can imagine that. In fact, we just did family pictures where all of us are holding guns. Because
all of your truck guns?
No.
Well, no, he lost those.
I lost all those in a boating accident.
That's right. How could I forget?
Now I got to think of another story because I said we're all holding guns.
Well, they were other people's
you
guns.
borrowed them.
Other people's guns.
From the photographer.
Yeah.
Borrowed them
from
the
totally,
photographer.
from a photographer who's probably going to get in a boating accident.
Yeah, no big deal.
Anyway, so it was silly hat day at the school, at the elementary school, and my daughter wore her hat to school. So they're sitting down there, and one of the kids was like, I don't know if you can wear that hat to school. And so they said, well, we better ask the teacher. So they go talk to the teacher, and the teacher's like, oh, I'm not sure. We better go talk to the principal. Sure enough, the principal's office, and they didn't scold her. They weren't demeaning or anything to her. Like, it wasn't a negative. She didn't get suspended. But she was asked not to wear the hat to school because I don't even know what the reasoning was exactly, like what the verbiage was put out. But I'm sure it had something to do with instilling fear or something like that, which is absolutely ridiculous. And when my wife told me this story, first of all, I may have got a little overexcited about what happened.
A little heated?
Yeah. And the principal will be getting an email from me. Like, no questions asked. They violated, though my daughter, she's only 9.
This is...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so, I keep thinking she's way older than
So they violated her First Amendment rights, and they're pushing on the line of Second Amendment rights. I don't think it's a Second Amendment issue. It's 100% a First Amendment issue.
Sure.
They violated her rights of freedom of speech. In my opinion, I could be wrong.
Well, the only way I could think of an argument against it is that, schools are supposed to function as parents during the school day.
Which I highly disagree with.
But that's the thing, is it's a little bit subjective because you as a parent would totally not mind her wear. Obviously, you'd support her wearing that.
Yeah.
And on top of that, one of you got it for her, right?
Yeah.
So
100%. My son wears his hat to school all the time. No problem.
The same hat?
Mm-hmm. Well, not pink, but yeah, same hat. No problems.
Right.
It's because of the principal.
And they have this, now they're in different schools, obviously, but it's the same district.
School district. And I know I need to be a lot more involved in my school district, and I think we've talked about that. We talked about when Representative Nate came to town, we talked about getting involved in school districts, having your administrators, because honestly, it's the district level that can approve firearms on campus.
Which, update on that, because we talked about that a long time ago.
Yeah,
in
long
the
time ago.
podcast. Some people may remember, but the update on that is there's some schools in this area since that bill was
that approved
passed,
it.
that their they've reached out to us for curriculum.
Fabulous.
And we're currently teaching.
And that's the other thing. This kind of fell in nicely with what we're doing with the local school. That like, everything's corresponding, which I thought it was just kind of coincidental how everything flowed together. Nonetheless, the teacher or the principal is going to get hopefully a pleasant email from me. I think she was completely misguided and incorrect. What she did, it had nothing to do with offending or keeping kids safe. It was a stupid hat.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's not, and the other thing, it's not even a hat with like a Glock logo on it or Sig Sauer or even a picture of a real gun. That's
honestly,
the other thing.
I probably could have sent her with a Glock hat or an Odin hat or...
Oh, definitely an Odin hat or something that nobody knows or like an Aero Precision or something like that. They would never have guessed.
Yeah. Which... not that we're demeaning any of those companies, but nonetheless, directly correlating with a firearm.
Right.
But because it looked like a gun.
Right. Well, the thing with like Odin or Aero or whatever is like, it's just the logo. They don't necessarily have a picture of a gun on it.
And I guarantee, I know I shouldn't judge by looking, but I guarantee this principal has no idea what those companies are.
Exactly. Well, probably unless you're in the firearms world, a lot of people, the public at large doesn't.
Yeah. And, and there's a lot of teachers in that district that are pro-gun or at least in the middle. Mm-hmm. They're not anti-gun. So like I'm saying, my son can go to the high school. He can wear his hat. He wears gun shirts at school. No problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that's kind of surprises me.
No problem.
Interesting.
But here we are, educators at a much younger age, and we'll go through some of these articles, demeaning and demonizing guns at a young age, almost imprinting them with negative connotations. So that they'll be standoffish with gun. That's what I wanted to talk about. Was like what outside forces are interfering with gun-minded families that are in direct opposition to what we're trying to teach.
Right. Well, and it looks like it's happening all over the country.
It does happen.
At least there's some news stories of it happening.
And some of these are old. Some of you guys probably have heard these before. In fact, and maybe you guys know more than we do. And if you do, you can jump on our Facebook page. Yeah, let us know. The new Facebook page, Range Minded Podcast on Facebook. Send us a message there or post. You can tag, post right on whatever. There. Yeah, let us share it. And I think it's important to get this stuff out, especially local stuff that's happening, and you need to get involved in your kids' lives more than just at home. As odd as that might sound, you should be involved in your school district. You're paying these teachers that may be teaching stuff that's completely wrong. Yeah, or it goes against what your beliefs are or whatever. Yeah. And that could go for any political affiliation either way. Yeah, it spans the whole spectrum. The point is that you need to be, and this is a non-parent telling parents, I guess, but preach it, baby, preach it. I mean, if you're going to have a kid, you need to be an active parent. You can't just drop them off. A responsible parent would be, right? Yeah, you can't just drop them off at school and expect everything's going to be hunky-dory. I mean, just for an example, when I was in high school, I didn't learn anything about personal finance or about money. I mean, I had to take an economics class. And now you're broke. But, yeah, exactly. And now I work, now I'm here at a gun store. Now I work radio. Right.
He's broke for other reasons. That's because he keeps buying guns.
But there are just some, yeah, exactly.
Careful, you'll get into a boating accident.
Well, now I'm going to get into Cerakoting, and then it's just going to be game over. So
I should share that picture of my 1911 as it progresses.
Yeah, quick sidebar. Steve's working on a 1911, a themed 1911, and the Cerakote job is done very impressively.
I think we talked about that when we were going through it.
And it's been taking me a long
It's the one that he's hand fitted everything.
This is from scratch, yeah. He smelted the iron and the steel. And
he chipped it out of the rock.
And then I had to reinvent fire.
Thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome.
It's very warm.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah, and timing is great. Mm-hmm. We'll post that on there. Why not? Nice, fun sidebar.
It's a lot of work.
And teaser, we'll probably end up doing a Cerakote episode at some point or another because now I need to Cerakote all of the things. Yeah, Jeff, our gunsmith, he's a certified Cerakote applicator. Sorry, this is getting sidetracked, but we're really talking about. So we got some knowledge, we got some abilities, and some pretty amazing stuff that's come out of the store. That would be fun. But anyway, back to parents and parenting and all and education. You should be just like you should have an active role in what your kid watches, what kind of video games they play or don't play, because you can't just park your kid in front of the TV for 8 hours a day when they're home from school, or put an iPad in their hand for whenever.
I've been guilty of that.
Sure.
Right?
I'm sure every parent does.
So it's so much easier, especially if you got really little kids, just to turn on TV and let them watch cartoons.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much easier, but it's probably the wrong thing to do.
Well, you're putting your kid in the hands of people who may not have their best interest in mind, or that they're trying to push an opinion or something like that.
And,
you know,
you
never know what's going to be on a kid's show unless you actually watch the kid's show.
And no wonder why kids get so stressed, especially teenagers. And maybe this counts to suicide rate. My son has 3-4 kids that he's known that's committed suicide.
Really?
So it's super high in a small town. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the reason why. Maybe there's other outside
Yeah, but
factors.
think about it when you were a kid. You grew up in the same town.
0. I don't remember any of my friends committing suicide. 0. But maybe that's why there's so much stress at that age, is because they're getting this huge disparity.
Well, and I think
I wasn't educated, but you know what I'm saying? So it causes this outside stress that maybe that's some of it.
Well, and we were just talking about this in the last podcast episode, but people are becoming more involved in technology on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. It's becoming more and more a part of our lives. And I can't say that I'm immune from it either.
No.
But it makes us to where we spend less time with our children.
Well,
potentially.
I heard some pretty interesting things this week. I listened to a lot of not music radio. And there's a couple in, I think they're in San Francisco. They work in the information industry. They make a lot of apps. And they have 0% screen time for their kids because they do not want to get them involved in it.
Really?
0. The only time they said that they have that the kids are allowed to watch movies, or they watch movies on a Friday, one movie on a Friday. They don't watch TV during the week. The only time they have iPads or whatever is if they're traveling, just to keep the kids settled down.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's crazy.
And then there was some other study that they were talking about addiction, screen time addiction, mm-hmm. that is as addictive as like narcotics.
Oh yeah.
Like the crack cocaine?
Yeah, they can't escape it. And
well, like you said,
see it.
Like you said, Mark, the only time you really notice it is when you're off your phone, is how many people are glued to their phones.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
To their technology.
And I'm guilty of that.
Oh, we're all guilty of it. But the fact that you know about it makes it a little bit better. If somebody says, I can put my phone down whenever I want, and then they people get visibly anxious when they can't,
it's ridiculous.
Check their phone or whatever.
What's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning?
Check your phone.
What's on Facebook?
Yep.
Who cares what's on Facebook? I guess I do, apparently.
Except for our new Facebook page.
Yeah. That's the only reason why I get up before breakfast is I check our Facebook page.
That's right. That's the only reason to check Facebook.
It's like information bacon.
But social media is getting kids in trouble too.
100%.
At school, and even
it's predatorial too.
Yeah. I mean, kids don't know better. They don't have the worldly knowledge, the life experience to navigate the waters of the internet or social media or whatever.
And what do? We stick in front of the feed gate of the dam, right? All of a sudden there's this huge gush of information.
Yeah.
It's like,
and they can find whatever they want. So
unfortunately,
but
anyway, back to what we're talking about.
Kids are getting in trouble at school for liking pictures of guns on Instagram, right?
100% asinine. Let's see, where's
he's got a pile of stories in front of him.
Oh, here's one. Middle school student gets suspended for liking a photo on Instagram.
Yep.
Liking a photo. Who the hell is the school think they are? Following my kid's Instagram account.
That's really creepy.
That was my big question, is how they found out that this kid liked, you know what I mean?
And my guess is another student narked him out.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
The details were not in the
this was about a little over a year and a half ago in Ohio. Small town Ohio, right? Trenton's not that small.
It just goes to show you, though, Big Brother is real.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
It's just as we grow with technology becomes more and more a part of our lives. Big Brother's fingers get involved if this is actually happening. Just you liking a photo.
Well, I'm wondering if it's like do schools routinely search kids' social media pages for things?
It might be more now.
And unfortunately, that's not protected. your social media account would not count as free speech.
No, it's not free speech.
It's open, but they want access to it, but you're not allowed to speak your mind on it. How stupid is that? So it's free speech sometimes.
Well, the thing with that is that you're agreeing to terms and services from a third party.
It is a private company.
And all
it is a private company. But this poor kid in Ohio, like he gets suspended, and this is what the school said concerning the recent social media posting of a gun with the caption "Ready," and the liking of this post by another student. The policy at Edgewood City Schools reads as follows. This is great radio, right?
Yeah.
It has zero tolerance. They count it as violent or disruptive.
And let's note here, the kid didn't make the post.
He liked it.
He liked a post.
And he shared it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's flip this on the head and play devil's advocate really quick, or I'll do that. But from their point, what they're probably
See that?
what they're probably trying to do is they're probably trying to. They're going to disguise it as them just trying to see the next active shooter.
Yeah.
Right?
So what they're doing is they're playing. What's that movie that was? With Tom Cruise, where Minority Report.
Oh,
they're trying to do the whole Minority Report thing, right? Oh, we'll know this before it happens.
Pre-crime is what it is,
which is guilty before, always guilty.
Yeah.
Guilty before you ever
completely
done
out of
anything.
line.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Why are schools on? I mean, I guess I can understand, looking for potential things, but I don't know. It just seems weird.
We don't know the mind of the kid. Maybe there was a problem with the kid before, and that's why. Maybe he was.
But wouldn't
flagged.
that be in the news? Wouldn't that be in the article?
It probably would have been. Yeah, you're probably right.
And it's not.
Yeah.
They interviewed the dad too, and he would have, if the father was anti-gun or was worried about his son, wouldn't you think he'd say, "Yeah, actually, I don't know why my kid was looking at guns. Yeah. That's weird to me." You know what I mean? Or that's out of character or something.
To me, it's. I gotta be careful not to swear. It's stupid that they demonize just the very essence of the image, right? Oh, we can't look at that. It's not pornography, which is way more damaging than an image of a gun.
Right.
But it's just frustrating.
Yeah, that's weird. And this isn't the only issue. I mean, there was another one where your other article.
Which one?
The about them going to the gun store.
Yeah,
the shooting range.
A family went to a shooting range and posted a picture, I believe,
of them out there. They went on vacation, so it was in a different state.
So imagine this, right? You guys, so you have family come out of town from some other state, California. Let's just say California, because that's probably the most relevant, right? They come from California. You bring them here to the range. You shoot a bunch of autos. You take a bunch of pictures. They post it on Facebook. Oh,
and then they return back to their state. They return back to school, and they find that they're suspended now because they took pictures with guns with their family.
And this isn't hyperbole. This happened.
This is literally what happened.
Yeah. And this one was specifically out of New Jersey.
Of course, in New Jersey.
So
I just don't. I mean, why? That's my big question. Was there any response from the school? I mean, so eventually in the article, long story short,
no, the school wouldn't respond to it. They said they couldn't discuss
that's right here.
Private student matters.
Didn't they say there was a policy there though? That
there is a policy. It's a specific policy in the schools.
But the policy eventually ended up getting overturned.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So here I'm just kind of reading through. They can't even have a simulated weapon in school. So you've heard about the stupid story about the poor little kid, the 5-year-old kid that chewed a Pop-Tart into a shape of a gun, which was more like the shape of Idaho. and he got suspended too. This little kid, what are we teaching him? Guns are evil.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a gun. He didn't take a gun to school. He didn't have a T-shirt of a gun. He didn't have a hat of a gun. He had a picture that his family posted on Facebook that was a simulated weapon. That was their reasoning? Asinine. There's one of our instructors out there trying to make faces. Ricky's trying to get him in here.
Yeah, nobody wants Bill in. Nobody wants to come in with us.
Bill might actually have some interesting input on this.
You think
Bill,
so?
Come join us. He's on the clock. I can see he's...
Why?
I can see
You guys remember Bill? If you've taken classes here, you definitely know Bill.
And we had an interview with Bill, too.
Oh, we got to turn that mic on.
Yeah, it's on. Don't worry.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Mic's on, but I got no headphones. Now what?
You're just going to have to hope and pray that we make you sound good.
Uh-oh.
So we're just going through some stuff real quick. We just kidnapped. I don't know if it's busy out there or not. They'll get over it. Just talking about how schools are demonizing guns, kind of counter teaching kids about the evil of a gun with just the very likeness of a gun or sound of a gun. And, we've got articles here of kids getting suspended from school from visiting a gun range.
Pointing their fingers like it's a gun.
Yeah.
Or liking photos of a gun on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that.
And getting a suspension.
Agendas are getting in the way of education. That's really a shame. You want to look at it as what it is. It's a tool, and if someone knows how to use it safely, it's a great tool. And if someone's stupid with it, it's just like a roofing hammer. If someone's stupid with a roofing hammer, we don't like roofing hammers.
Yeah, you get a.
But it's the person, not the object, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got some agendas going on there that you can see all the way back into, especially higher education's got some real agendas. We just can't, I don't know how you fix that. How you unlearn that.
Where do you think that agenda comes from?
Well, right now in America, it's kind of polarized. There's black and white on things, and there's no middle ground. And so I think sometimes people just want to pick a fight, and that happens to be what they pick the fight over.
Well, it's an emotional topic right now, too. And it tugs on those heartstrings like, if we didn't have guns...
Then this wouldn't have happened.
The synagogue wouldn't have got shut up.
Yeah.
It would have Parkland. Yes, we would have. They'd just been a different tool.
Yeah, exactly. But you think about the whole thing at the synagogue in Pittsburgh. If you honestly look at it and you ask yourself this question, if that guy went in to do that evil act and there was one well-qualified, educated person that stood up, shot him, and stopped it, the whole venue would change.
Absolutely.
The whole idea would change.
Well, the next day, there was a guy that went in and robbed a McDonald's, and the dad stopped him, shot him dead, boom.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. If you had somebody that stopped that synagogue shooting, it wouldn't have even made the news.
There's a lot of truth to that, because what we're seeing today is a news media that instead of reporting facts, I remember that as a kid, news reported straight facts. And there was opinionated journalism that was there, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. And now you can't even report total facts. You report only those facts that support your side.
Well,
you're absolutely right, Ricky. It's a broken way of reporting.
All they are is opinion is in editorials. That's it. There's no just the facts anymore, right? There's no such.
Well, there's a lot of speculation, and then people get that speculation confused, but they don't necessarily make it clear that it's speculation either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Speculation often.
And you're right. I think both sides of the argument only share their side of the argument. There's no conversation. It's just like this is the way it is.
So Bill, I'm glad Bill's in here because he has a very unique perspective, and I'm kind of just throwing this question at him without him knowing. But Bill retired.
You have no idea what you walked into, Bill.
Bill retired as a detective.
Help.
Bill, did you? And I don't know if you're even able to share these, but in your work as a detective, did you have any homicides you had to deal with, or any situations you had to deal with dealing with youth? Were with youth involved? Where the youth shot somebody in the house or something like that?
Yeah, both accidents, accidental negligence, and as well as intentional homicides, because it wasn't uncommon in the larger city that I was working to have 12, 13-year-old hardcore gangsters that were always packing guns.
That's crazy.
So it was their intent. Yeah. So yeah, all the time.
Okay.
But Oh, go ahead.
So basing off of what you have seen in the field, what is your opinion about firearms safety in the home? How do we protect? How do we protect youth? How do we teach youth?
And how do maybe even one more question is how do we counteract all the negative? Like, what do we do as parents to help teach our kids a good perspective?
Well, I think it's a very individual thing. I think every parent knows when they're, I'll use like this term, age of accountability. Mm-hmm. And that term, I'll just kind of put it in a box for you. It means when your kid, and it may, if you've got 5 kids in the house, it may be different for each one of them, right?
Oh, yes.
When they individually are old enough to understand consequences. Mm-hmm. So I think the worst thing we can do is we can hide the idea that we have a firearm in the house, because kids know. a young boy, 9, 10 years old, he knows there's a gun in the house. So if you hide and ignore it and pretend it's not there, that's a real tragedy.
Yeah, because then the intrigue and they're curious, and that's
curiosity gets the best of them.
Curiosity gets the best of them. But I think as soon as the parent, provided the parent's being educated and reasonable and understands themselves, they need to educate the kid. And they need to educate him to the point that they're comfortable based on that child's maturity. Mm-hmm. So some basic safety. I think I just saw a video. It might even have been one of our employees, Facebook, that had a younger daughter, and she was pretty sharp. And she basically posted a little short thing where the daughter said, "These are things we don't touch."
Oh yeah, I think that was Jessica.
Yeah,
where her daughter was, and I love Jessica's video because she was teaching her daughter. Her daughter was 3 when she was doing this, and she didn't have her daughter touching the gun with her hands. She had a stick, touching different parts of the gun and going over gun safety. I thought that was awesome.
Safety, and so we as a parents got to take our lead in that. We can't just leave it to social media to educate people. Mm-hmm. It's something that's a tactile tool that we have to teach them about.
You mean everything on the internet's not true?
I heard that once. Yeah, yeah. So we got to teach them, and then I think some 7-year-olds may be able to take care of business where maybe some 9-year-olds or 12-year-olds wouldn't.
Well, honestly, I see people on the range that are grown adults that I don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, there's also
guns.
that.
Yeah. So it comes down to
their maturity level isn't there.
Yeah.
There's so many things when it comes to the violence associated with firearms, but we always forget that it is a person in some way, shape, or form that was either negligent or malicious in the use of that piece of equipment that resulted in whatever tragedy it was. And so I think the single greatest thing we can do as adults is if we have a firearm in the house and we're not actively carrying it or it's not actively on us, let's lock it up.
Absolutely.
Let's just go buy one of those good safes that we can put up there and lock it up. Especially with striker-fired guns, take it apart. Take the slide off of the thing. Make it 2 pieces. Because really, how a qualified person, how fast could they put a slide on the top of a striker-fired gun today, insert a magazine, and make that pistol operational? But on the rear side of that, how much more safer we made it for whatever kid may come into the house that's a friend of your child's or a friend of my child's. Mm-hmm. And we don't know where so we've already, we've taken some steps. And then you turn around, you lock it up. Is another thing. I'm not a big fan of the trigger guards, but some of the safes, like are sold here, some of the fingerprint safes, some of the quick combination safes, and even just a simple key safe. It's just a pound of prevention.
Anything that puts a barrier between the child and access to a firearm.
Yep.
This is going
unauthorized user, any unauthorized user.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Because I've got a good friend. His son is functional, but he's Downs. Mm-hmm. And he's got a natural curiosity to him. He's at an age where he's got a natural curiosity to him. So while his body itself may be 20 years old, the functional characteristics won't get much past the age of 9, but he sure is a curious 200 pounds.
Yeah, they're strong too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of things. Like you said, you've got to be able to deal with it. So it's not just kids. It's anyone that's not able to understand the use of that tool. And sometimes it's just flat out ignorance.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, a kid's friend, could be more curious and push the kid into going to look for it or whatever if nobody's home or whatever, or the other way around. You might have a kid going into somebody else's home or something.
I remember as a young man, I forget, it's like 12 years old. My dad was a cop. And I remember trying to impress a girl. You're 12 years old and you really don't know what you're doing. You're trying to impress a girl.
I'm 40-year-old and I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I brought her over and I walked past the front room and I walked into the bedroom where my parents' room was and I walked into the closet and I pointed up on the shelf. I said, "My dad's a cop and those are his cop guns." And I remember my dad coming in, and that ended not good for me because he flat out. Now they were high enough we couldn't reach him. And in that day, most of them were unloaded. He was very safe. He was a Marine and he was a cop. And but I mean, there was no ambiguity. That was wrong, and it was dealt with right then and there. And we're a little leery to say there's right and wrong anymore.
And you didn't end up impressing that girl because you got yelled at in front of her.
No, she was excused from the room, and I didn't end up impressing her anyway. I was 12 years old. I didn't know what I was doing, Ricky.
But see, it came down to the parenting, is that you knew your dad was going to exact justice upon you if you violated, one of his rules.
Yeah, exactly.
It was that simple.
Responsible ownership is what it comes down to.
And that's one of the things is rules and consequences, right? Create rules in the home. I've got a couple of guns that haven't lost in a boat accident yet. And my son, my 16-year-old son, he understands it. He knows. In fact, I got family pictures the other day, and one of the pictures was us all holding guns. And I got maybe you've seen my youngest, my 6-year-old, little tornado, and we had a pellet or BB gun for her, and one flag, right? She flagged the photographer one time. My son's like, "You're done." Took the gun away from her, and she was the only one which was awesome with me. Like it was fine with me because my son understands, and luckily, somehow. One of the few things that have gone through his melon that he understands is gun safety. And probably because I spent more time with him shooting and at the range. And my daughters, they're not really into it, but they still need to know and understand that.
Yeah, I agree.
It was just funny.
So what build, and this is hinging off of the training we just got back from in Wisconsin, but they were asking about... They were talking about
whole nother story.
Yeah, that'll be a whole other story. But anyway, they were talking about when you put your gun in the safe, do so in a holster. Do you agree with that? Because some people are staging their guns throughout their homes in a safe. Do you now have to keep it in a holster as well, or should it be?
They brought up a valid point that I think has about 20% merit, and that is that in a degree of stress, would you reach for that gun kind of using the paw like a raccoon grabbing for something, and would you accidentally grab that trigger and therefore result in an accidental negligent discharge while in the safe? And I don't know the real stats, whether that's likely to happen or not. I don't have a problem putting it in a holster, and I can see covering the trigger because you're picking it up off of a flat surface. I've not had that experience, so I find that most people that are educated enough to have a firearm know how to use it, took the steps to buy a safe, to put it in. They're probably, can't always say always, but they're probably pretty adept with manipulation of it.
And not everybody stores a magazine with their firearm loaded in the safe either. And there's arguments both sides of that. Keeping it in the safe loaded or unloaded, I can understand the point of view on both sides of that. I'm not telling you what I do. I don't know that. I don't know. We make big deals out of having to be instantly ready. I'm not sure you got to be instantly ready. I had a good friend. Well, I know my castle hopefully better than an intruder does, anyways.
Yeah. I had a good friend that was instantly ready. Kept a gun in the nightstand, and he was startled in the middle of the night. And woke up and shot an intruder in the doorway of his bedroom. Unfortunately, it turned out to be his son on the way home to surprise him from college.
Awful.
And so I personally don't keep a loaded gun by the side of my bed. I do keep a safed gun by the side of my bed, and I do have to put a magazine in, and I do have to rack the slide. I want to have a moment to wake up and get my wits about me before I do something, because we were using the analogy, it's a tool, a roofing hammer. If I smack myself with the roofing hammer on the thumb because I missed the nail, what's the worst case scenario? I lose a fingernail?
And you throw some swear words out.
Yeah, and you cuss a little bit because it hurts. But the mistake with a pistol is...
hard to take back.
Can't ever put the bullet back in the barrel. So common sense prevails. Training, utmost training. Common sense and training. Can't beat that up enough.
So in your... firearms instructor capacity, have you instructed and educated kids in any way, or?
Here I've not. In the past I have. In law enforcement we've had some classes with kids. Those classes are really geared towards kids not touching and reporting, because it's the younger kids, first, second, third graders. You find it, what do you do with it? Don't touch it, report it to an adult.
Yeah, and that's the NRA's, the Eddie Eagle, right? Stop, don't touch, run away, tell an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which isn't bad.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't know what could inadvertently have. They could accidentally discharge a firearm.
Right.
And there's just a big difference, though, between kids, like, say, here in Idaho, which, you get kids still, a lot of kids still on the farm, agricultural community, cattle community. A 10-year-old young man working a farm understands the use of a firearm much, much different than a 10-year-old urban. Yeah,
because it's taught as a tool.
Instead of a toy. Exactly. And there's not a mystique about it. It's just what it is. Yeah. You had to put down the dog because the dog was hurt, got run over, and that's the tool we used to do it with, or the deer that accidentally got hit had to do. Yeah. So it really comes to culture and where someone's grown up, and that's so diverse in America. That's why I think the Midwest just laughs at some of the things that come out of some real liberal people when they talk about the use of firearms in the West here and in the Midwest. They just laugh. They have no concept when someone from a major metropolitan city starts capping on or bagging on this piece of equipment that they use every day that's rattling around the back of their pickup truck.
Yeah, that's one of the things.
Which would be an AR-15 potentially.
Oh yeah,
Could be, yeah.
Those are scary.
That's one of the things that that I realized on my drive from Illinois to Idaho moving here was that this country is an amazingly huge place with so many different ways to live and so many different, I mean, think about how varied the landscape is in the U.S. and there's people living in all those different landscapes. And so you can't necessarily paint with such a broad brush one way of living when it doesn't apply on another side of the country.
Well, I had a grandfather that had a truck gun in his old Chevy pickup truck. It was an old
truck gun. Okay,
yeah.
you guys, it's not a new term with me.
Yeah,
He
it was
had
an
a
old
truck gun.
Ruger 5-shot SP-101, I think it was.
Nice, great gun.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
a great gun, and it was always in the glove box, and the box of shells was right next to it. It was never loaded, but there was a box of shells right next to it.
Yeah.
And half of the box of shells was snake shot, right? Because where he grew up in the West, up here in Montana, that's just the way it was. So, you know, it's someone in Chicago might see it different than someone in rural Montana, I think.
Well, I think it comes down to their experiences because someone in rural Montana sees it and it's a normal everyday thing. It's a tool. But the only time somebody in Chicago might hear about it or see it is being the victim of violence or hearing about it on the news. Because, man, going back home to Illinois and watching the news there, murder, gang violence, murder, shot, murder. Like the first 10 minutes is all like violent. I'm like, oh my God, this is depressing.
Well, and I think we got to be careful because it almost sounds like it's such a quantum leap between Idaho and Chicago. I watch the news, or I get reports of the news here in Boise. We're not that far from it. It may happen on a different volume.
Sure, yeah,
But
that's
it's
a fair
still
point.
there. And those that don't see gun rights the same way we do always are going to use that information in a negative way. Always.
Sure.
There's no insight. There's no thought process. Like, well, okay, why are these guns why are they so important to some of these other people?
Well, and you have to see it from the news perspective of actually putting stories out there and getting viewers.
Yeah, they want ratings,
reviews.
and it's sad.
If it bleeds, it leads. And guns are the hot topic now. So if you just crashed into somebody and there were 30 people died in that, 10-car pileup or whatever, or if there's gang violence, what's gonna lead?
Well, and I think I've mentioned this before that it's there is, if it bleeds, it leads, but the root of that is because if you don't report on it, somebody else will.
Yeah, they want the scoop. They want to jump on the scoop. They want to get the viewership, and then they want to use the emotionals.
And
to keep the
unfortunately, that's
viewership.
what gets people to watch and to listen and to tune in. It's
sad.
It's kind of a two-way street a little bit.
It's kind of, and I think it must be obviously human nature, because what do we do when we drive past a car accident?
Slow down.
We want to see. Oh man, we want to see carnage, right?
Yeah,
even if it grosses us out, we want to see it.
Even if it's just somebody pulled over, you see red and blue lights, people are going to slow down real fast.
Yeah.
I mean, partially because you have to and it's the right thing to do, but to make sure everybody's safe, because there's a law, right, in Idaho?
Yeah.
I think everywhere you have to pull over and slow down. But it's mainly to see, I think a lot of people actually slow down because they're curious.
I've driven past some where they have the curtains up already blocking the accident because somebody might be dead over there. And
Really? I've never seen those.
yeah, I can't remember where I seen that, but
So anyway, well,
All right,
thank
guys.
you.
Hey,
We'll take
Bill's-
care.
Bill's
See
gotta
you,
go back to
Bill.
work.
Thanks for the impromptu cameo. We appreciate it.
Thanks, man. All right. See,
Well, that
it's
was
always
great.
It's always nice to have some insight.
I know. Yeah, you don't just have to hear from us three jerks. So big thank you to Bill on that one.
two jerks. You guys, I'm not a jerk.
And me.
Yeah. So I guess some of the stuff I gathered from Bill, like when we're trying to combat what our kids are learning on the negative side, first of all, just be interactive and be responsible parents, right? Teach our kids. So I have a buddy that took his kids hunting at a very young age, right? So they saw the devastation that can happen from a firearm. They see right off the bat, they see that it can take a life.
You show them the consequences.
Well, and that's where, so like Bill was talking about his dad, he had the guns, but they weren't in a safe. They were probably still on his belt that was up I don't know how he kept it, but he might have just taken his belt off and put it up there.
Possible,
so the gun's
yeah.
still in the holster. But I grew up in a home without a safe, and my dad had the guns. He had pistols. He had, the long guns. And
You made it out alive, right?
I made it out alive. So my question, and knowing that, there's a caveat. I do have firearms in my home, and I do keep them in safe. Every single one of them is locked up. But why are we in a society now where we have to worry about that? That we have to worry about locking our guns up, and it's kind of, it's a rhetorical question, but because I do believe in safes and I do believe locking them up, but I also do think it's a disservice to our children that we live in that world where we do have to do that. I currently teach at an elementary school now. Where we go over there and we provide this for free for the kids, but we went over there and we teach gun safety and different things for 9 weeks. It's a 9-week semester course,
Which is tremendous.
It's awesome.
That to me, that's amazing. That now it's not a public school.
It's charter.
It's a charter school. So obviously there's some input that they can kind of veer away from some of the education union in a little bit. They can do whatever they want in some aspects, which is great. But it's too bad that the public schools, and again, I guess that's where it comes back to spending time being involved in the school board, that you can do that too.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, and I harp a lot on the violent media, violent video games. I'm not a video gamer, so I granted I'm out of that world. I'm disconnected from it. But, when we go over and we talk to these kids that are at this school, that's the number one thing. And I posed a question to all the kids. I said to them, what video game have you guys played? Have you guys ever played a video game where you get shot once and you never get to play a video game again in your life? And they just couldn't understand what I was asking. And they're like, oh yeah, I've played those video games like at the arcade. You just have to put more money in. I'm like, no, you didn't understand my question. Is there a video game out there that you die one time and you never get to play a video game ever again? And they're like, well, that would be boring. Of course it would be boring, but that's real life.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of a firearm. If you treat it as a toy, like we were talking about with Bill, versus a tool, you only get one chance. You can't put that bullet back in. You can't, take that action back. Yeah. Steve, you share the example of your childhood friends who one died from a BB gun.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this before, but a good friend of mine growing up, they were cleaning their room, and a pellet gun, which seems so benign, and that's not enough power to kill
almost like
anybody.
it doesn't count.
Yeah. So it was pumped, it was charged. That was a mistake somewhere, but kids do kid things. We don't think about it when we're little. His older brother was putting something up on a shelf, and when my buddy picked up the pellet gun, it snagged on his shirt and it fired, and it went through the left ventricle of his heart. And
wow.
His brother died in 20 minutes.
It's horrible.
Dennis was never the same. Obvious reasons, right? Completely understandable. But a whole family changed. A whole family dynamic changed just from something simple. But there was some rules that weren't followed, right? You didn't respect the firearm safety rules.
Yeah. Well, and that's
he taught those safety rules?
I don't.
That's an important point, though, is that even with a pellet gun or an air gun or anything like that, you have to follow those 4 rules no matter what.
And I remember some other friends' houses that they weren't even allowed to have cap guns, right? Well, they had cap guns, but we could never play like Cowboys and Indians or Cops and Army. We weren't allowed to do that. We were not allowed to point those cap guns.
And this is where, and I might be, I'm maybe an overprotective parent, because I do get to that point. In training, you have what you call force on force training. It's a reality. You are going to have guns pointed at you in this, and you are going to have projectiles coming toward you. These projectiles are man-marking rounds, and they're training rounds. They're meant to cause pain, but not traumatic injury.
They're not lethal.
Yeah, they're not lethal. And So we do in our training point firearms, not live firearms and not, real firearms, but training firearms. We point training firearms at each other.
But it's also controlled under a very controlled circumstance.
And I would argue, too, that that's also advanced level training. You're not going to bring somebody in who has never fired a gun before.
We've talked about that guy. I'm not going to give his name out. That is a horrible instructor that on the entry-level training classes, he's pointing, they're not live, but what the hell difference does it make? Mm-hmm. But he's pointing guns at students at the beginning at an entry level.
Horrible idea.
Yeah, and it's so amazing. My question, and it's so interesting because I grew up with the cap guns, like playing cowboys and robbers, and I mean, you shoot at each other, you point guns at each other, and you run around with the finger on the trigger. Mm-hmm. It's just like, because I never learned, as a kid necessarily how to handle a firearm.
Well, in all honesty, and mind you, I have no military experience, but I could totally see that in the heat of battle, they're probably running around with their triggers in their finger in the fingers in the trigger guard too.
But that's again
a totally different aspect.
Highly trained,
highly trained people. That doesn't excuse or justify any bad behavior outside of the range.
I think that the best thing you can do is just take the mystery and the mystique out of it for your kids and
spend time with them. I never saw Jessica's video. Jessica, if you guys don't know, she's one of our instructors. I'm friends with her on Facebook. I'll have to dig it up. What a better way to teach? Spend time sitting down and teach them.
Well, and if she's cool with it, maybe we can get it up on the podcast page.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was an awesome way of training. So at 3 years old, obviously, that firearm's been deemed unloaded by her mom and her dad. But still, Jessica is taking precautions. Jessica and her husband are taking precautions that 3-year-old child is still not handling the firearm. They give her a stick.
Yeah, there's a distance between
and I think that's so awesome.
Yeah. But it takes the mystery out.
Which is why, I think back at how when I was a kid, why I never even touched the gun. And I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I never touched my dad's guns because I knew I could if I asked him. Right. We would go out shooting. I knew I was going to take that 30-06 out and go hunting with it eventually. So why did I need to go and shoot it? I had my BB gun and I had my bow that I could go out and that was readily accessible. I could take that out anytime I wanted. So, but it comes down to the maturity of the kids too. And this is my little soapbox on video games, but I do think video games are taking the maturity level down of the kids.
Yeah. Well, I think Colonel Grossman talks about that. I was just going
to say that. It talks about on killing about, and it's obvious that the simulations, if you can start a simulation at a younger age, it pulls those moral blocks out of the way, and
it makes it less real.
So you're making a generation of killers.
Yeah,
and I hate putting it that way, but Lieutenant Grossman, he also has, and I know we've talked about this on the podcast before too, but his new book, Assassination Generation, talks about that. It is a generation of killers.
Yeah. And not that it's creating killers, but it's making it less of a moral dichotomy.
It's more of an animalistic.
Yeah, it's taking away those moral barriers, or at least making them way thinner.
Yeah, because, and just to go over it, the whole premise of Colonel Grossman's work is that humans have an innate aversion to killing anybody of their own species.
Yep.
But there are ways to remove that aversion and inoculate people from that aversion to get them to kill. And he makes the arguments that simulation and distance and all these other things, which is why military training's a thing, goes into that. And
in that book, he talks about the accuracy rate, I guess, the engagement rates,
the shooting rates
from Civil War or even before Civil War, Independent War, all the way up through Vietnam.
Just because of the targets they used,
the change of targets and the change of training. So it can be overcome. So you're probably right. Like, we may disagree on video games, whether it's a display of violent action. Did the video games make the kid violent, or did kid already have violent behavior that drew him to the video game?
Right.
So that's kind of the chicken and the egg probably argument. It doesn't matter. It most likely propagates violent behavior. I can totally agree with that. But I don't know if it creates the violent behavior. I'm not sure.
The other thing to remember, too, is that, and you'll hear this from, video game developers and stuff, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'd like to think it's true, is that those video games like Call of Duty and like the violent first-person shooters and stuff are made for adults, like 17, 18, 19, 20. It
says right on the ESRB rating.
Yeah, and it's here in the States, it's 17, I think, is rated M, is 17 and over. But in Europe and in other places, it's 18.
Yeah.
Let's pose it a different way, though. These video games are made for adults. But do you guys... I do, but do you guys believe that they still affect adult minds as well?
Oh, sure.
I think about The Walking Dead.
But the one thing that might be different, and maybe this is I like video games, so and I do have Call of Duty and first-person shooter games.
Yeah, same.
Because I enjoy playing them. But the difference might be is my exposure to them was far later in life, where my brain probably stopped developing a long time ago, let's be honest. But you know what I'm saying? So my vulnerability or my developing brain maybe didn't get addicted to them like they would have if I was young.
Well, not even addicted. It's you can put a clear distinction between reality and video games. Like, that this is fake. You know what I mean? It's not a real thing.
So reality, that's important.
Yeah, a kid who's developing and and playing these games with graphics that are amazing and all that kind of stuff,
and always getting better
and getting more realistic. That's, I think, a bit of a difference between, that might be harder for a developing brain to notice or to make that distinction.
So I remember being as a kid watching. It was probably 3-2-1 Contact. Now the older you guys are probably too young, but 3-2-1 Contact and those shows on PBS, real learning shows, they were talking about the condors. The California condor was almost extinct. Maybe you guys don't remember that.
Vaguely.
It might have been before you guys were even born because you're so young.
Maybe.
But so they were they'd find breeding pairs, but they would hand care for these chicks at a young age.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, they learned, and that's where the term imprinting came from, or at least to my understanding is if the person taking care of the chick was there in front of the chick
when they came out of the egg.
When the minute they came out of the egg, that was the parent. So they wouldn't recognize mother condor as mom. So they had a puppet that they would use to feed these chicks that looked like
right.
So imprinting, right? So we're talking about, that's what I want to bring imprinting into the understanding or into the conversation. So are we imprinting our kids this violent behavior? Are we allowing that imprinting to happen as parents? Probably.
Well, because you're not screening what Call of Duty is. Like, I wouldn't let my kids play Call of Duty until they were old.
You don't have kids?
No, if I had kids though.
This is a hypothetical.
That we know of?
I don't know. No, trust me, I would know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a complicated issue. I think there's a lot of different things. Video games.
It's super dynamic, and there's no way we could dissect it and come to a understanding.
We're never going to come
podcast.
to a conclusion on it. But I mean, if you think about it, like, social media is only 20 years old. Video games are only 40 years old.
Access to the internet. You guys probably grew up with internet in your house, right?
No.
I remember when we first got internet. Yeah.
I was in middle school. I think the later part of my middle school when we got AOL dial-up.
So I would have been. When we finally got internet, I was probably 17. It was only because my brother was into computers. Yeah. My parents would not have done it. They didn't care.
Well, and that's the thing, is that we don't know what internet, social media, realistic video games have, what kind of effect they have on kids, on a developing brain.
We're just getting to the point where we can understand that.
Right.
Because it's so new to society.
Yeah. And so we don't know. And unfortunately, we're finding out, I think, some things the hard way.
And honestly,
these video games are going to get even more real world, like with these virtual reality goggles that you put on.
Oh yeah.
And you can look anywhere in a room, and now that room has become a virtual reality.
Well, and they have VR games. I've played it before once, where you have a gun in your hands, because you hold on to these controllers in either hand, and you have to clear the gun, unload it, reload it, put it up, and set the sights for it and everything. And
one of the booths,
really realistic. It's really fun, but we were also an adult.
I'm not sure if it was Trigicon, but one of the booths at SHOT Show, I guess this year, because this was in January, they had a virtual reality set. There's probably more than that, but yeah. It was all about guns, but they weren't shooting people or nothing in the games. Right. It was like clay pigeons and bottles and stuff.
But the interesting thing is that guns have been around for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about, Ricky, that your dad had guns not in a safe, and you knew not to mess with them. Bill talked about his dad's guns were up high. Knew where they were and knew not to mess with them. So what's changed over the years? You know what I mean? Since then, and I'm not going to say it's one thing. I'm not going to try to put my finger on it. I'm not that smart.
Right. It's probably aggregate of a lot of things, TV and video games, and that it probably diminishes the finality of a gun, to where kids are like, yeah, whatever. It was just.
Yeah, could be.
I don't know.
And granted, it's only going to be a few of those kids that are going to flip and become murderers. It's a very,
you can say that about adults too, though.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm not trying to paint it that everybody who plays video games is a born killer going to be, but I do think that it fans the flames. It could potentially fan those flames.
Sure.
And again, I think that comes down to being involved with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a shooting family, if you're a gun family, take them shooting as a family. Go with them so they can get past all the scariness, and the intrigue. Talk about the gun. Be like Jessica. Talk about the dangers and the what not to touch. And, if you want to ask Dad to show you the gun, I'd be happy to take my kids aside and show them. Not even aside, because that makes it sound like, oh, well, let's not go anywhere else when we can see us, and we'll talk about it again on the kitchen table. Sure, why not?
Yeah. Or you could take them shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say too, get the jump on, you as a parent, I think you're responsible for helping your kids form their opinions on things.
Sure.
And educating them. And so if you're concerned about a school doing that before you, get the jump on the school, or anybody else for that matter, whatever organization, get the jump on it and set those, teach your kids first before anything else. Don't just depend on anybody else to do it.
Reach out to your school and have ask them to do what these forward-thinking schools that we're working with are doing, and actually make a curriculum.
And I understand the intimidation of going into a school board meeting and bringing it up, have people looking at you,
right.
But I would be willing to guess that there's at least one other person with that mindset.
Oh yeah.
You just need one person to speak up, and then other people who think the same thing will join up. Yeah. There's that in politics and all that, a lot of people talk about a silent majority, where a lot of people just don't talk about something.
And I really believe in the United States is a vast majority of like-minded individuals to what we believe, for the most part, fundamentally in the political climate or whatever. But we just don't want to think about it. Oh, that's just so stupid. We just kind of let it pass.
Yeah. Speaking of which, next Tuesday is voting time.
This Tuesday. Well, by the time this one's out,
by the time this podcast out,
it would have already been gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, way to give it away when we recorded this. But you're right. We need to be involved in every aspect of our kids' lives. At the very minimum, that's our progeny, right? We can actually have pride in our family if we teach them the right aspects and the right principles in life, and including constitutional principles. My son, I'm still waiting for his book report. Maybe I told you guys.
I remember the book report.
I gave him, I can't remember what book I gave him, something constitutional. I was like, I want an 800 word report.
You gave him the 1,000-year leap, or is that
the 5,000-year leap?
5,000-year leap.
I don't know if I gave him that. That is a fantastic book. If you guys haven't read it, whether you guys listen or you two here,
Skousen.
That is a great book to read, and it's not hard to read.
What is it? 5,000.
The 5,000 year leap by Cleon Skousen.
Fair enough.
Great
Put it
book.
up on there.
Yeah, please read it. Please spend some time. Read David Grossman. Understand the psychology of the brain.
We do have, I've been in contact with Joel Skousen, Cleon's nephew, and he said he would come up here and do a seminar.
Oh, that'd be so awesome.
So,
and very constitutional. The Skousen family is very constitutional. But there's so many other aspects. The NSSF has some great kids stuff. The NRA has some great kids stuff. We do kids stuff here at the store.
Yep, we sure do.
Don't feel like you're left alone, right?
There's a lot of resources out there to help you.
Yeah, and it's damn frustrating when your kid comes home from school because they can't wear a frickin' hat. Mm-hmm. That is not scary. The hat's not going to jump off and start doing a massacre.
But remember, too, that gives you an opportunity as a teachable moment to say, well, your school's stupid in this regard, or I disagree with that, and here's why.
And luckily, like I said, the experience wasn't complete. It was more negative to me than it was my daughter.
Yeah.
And it was funny. And it completely took me off guard as my wife told her it was kind of a violation of her First Amendment. My wife's not really, she doesn't get into politics.
Right.
And for her to say, yeah, well, that was like a violation of your First Amendment rights. People are listening to me in my house. It's weird.
That's crazy. Well, we'll close on that, I think.
Yeah.
I think we've preached enough for one.
I don't know if we
day.
really got to a true resolution. So I guess
there is no true resolution.
I guess what it comes down to is spend time with your kids, bring them shooting to the range, teach them safety, and take the mystique and the mystery out of the gun.
And if you are not trained in firearms, train yourself. You get knowledgeable with firearms if you think that they're these evil killing machines.
And you can spend a few minutes Googling or YouTubing good content. You get bombarded with a bunch of other BS, but there's some good content out there.
Well, and to go off of that too, you said you yourself, if you're, afraid or there's some sort of you think guns are evil, do some research. Or if you have a friend who thinks that guns are evil, take him shooting.
Yeah.
Take it, bring him over here to Independence.
And hopefully, and I still want to, hopefully one day we'll be able to grab some couple of college students that are like from BSU and bring them here and give them a chance to maybe change their mind or at least open their mind to some perspective.
Yeah, let me see what we can do. So, well, on that note, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to us.
Thanks for listening.
How long was that part? Well,
pushing an hour.
Yeah, so by the time it's done, we'll be an hour. But
thanks for listening to Steve rant.
Yeah,
it's good every once in a while. It's good to have you back in person. That's for sure.
And if you guys have had similar experiences, those of you with kids, share it.
Yeah, Facebook Range Minded Podcast. Find us, post, message anything you want, and. Maybe we'll have a feedback episode after that.
I think it'd be awesome. I really want to get your guys' attention. Like we got employees waving like weirdos out there.
People know now. So, But anyway, we'll close on that. Get a hold of us on the Facebook page and post feedback, all that kind of stuff. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Ricky, you don't want to say bye?
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. If you've got a comment, question, idea for the show, or any feedback, send us an email to podcast@iishooting.com or send us a message on our Facebook page. Just search Independence Indoor Shooting. Again, thanks for listening to Range Minded. We'll see you next time.